Of all the races I have battled throughout the galaxy, the Orc is the hardest to comprehend. They wage war with machines that should not work, care little for strategic gains, and are just as likely to slaughter each other as the enemy. How does one battle an enemy that defies all logic? The galaxy as we know it is beset by plagues, corruptions, and ancient horrors aplenty. The influence of long-perished demagogues still ravaging its many verdant worlds. Immortal tyrants, crestfallen Castellans, and upstart empires waxing and waning with the passage of time. Only in rare instances is a species created with such malice that it blights the stars, irrespective of circumstance. For today, we shall elucidate the fungal menace which plagues the galaxy, a biological weapon which, despite its degeneration, has regardless remained a constant threat which must not be underestimated. The Greenskin Tide, the Orcoid species. In order to understand these crude abominations, one must first recount what is known of their creation. The meddling of strange Xenos, unknowingly concocting a species too grotesque to be considered anything more than barbaric. More than 60 millennia ago, predating even the human species gracing the stars, nascent empires squabbled over the dominion of the galaxy. The naivety of the sickly Necrontyr, forever darkening the void with their spite. Allying themselves with the voracious star gods, the Catan, in order to wrestle dominion of the stars from the old ones of yore. To combat such a threat, the primordial reptilians sired new entities to fight in their stead. The Eldari foremost of their children, for whilst the old ones prized intelligence as the hallmark of their craft, such as was seen in the Jokero, Slann, and other similar geneses, to defeat the revivified Necron Empire, a far blunter instrument would carry out their will. Hulking monstrosities, standing as tall as 12 meters in height, cast their shadow upon their enemies. The beings known as Kroks, armed and armored with equipment far more sophisticated than can be regarded by their contemporary descendants. The so-called Brain Boy ancestors of the Gretchen, creating expendable cannon fodder which we today would regard as the Orcs. With the war in Heaven won, the Old Ones no longer needed the Krork species to maintain their dominance, implanting genetic dispositions into their lesser kin's genome to grant them insight on how to create their strange technologies. Though no record pertains to how the Brain Boys and the Krork species dwindle, it is likely that the Eldari species, gifted as they were with psychic talent, purged them from the domains to which they would inherit. Yet the lesser Orcoid species would survive. Their collective psychic imprint on reality, though unable to be properly harnessed, morphed into a gestalt which they regard among themselves as the Great Green. Their ramshackle creations, functioning despite no worldly reasoning for them to do so, in time, certain color schemes, mantras, and ideological staples would crystallize into tangible effects merely as a result of their collective belief. Yet with the rise of the Imperium of Man, humanity would test its mettle against the Greenskin menace. Their 50 millennia of devolution, regardless providing a mass of bodies to which the Scions of the Great Crusade would purge. The single largest threat to mankind, due to the Necron slumber and Eldari's downfall following their creation of the being known as She-Who Firsts. Only the Orcs had maintained what could loosely be designated as a star-spanning civilization. Their numbers competing with that of the amassed strength of humanity. Upon their tech fiefdom, Goro, within the Telon Reach, the Orcs fell in droves to the guns of the Emperor's mighty fleet. His most cherished son, Horus Lupercal, leading the charge to destroy Goro and rid the Orcs of their war machine's technological backbone. As the 1,000-strong Lunar Wolves descended, so too did the Master of Mankind and his greatest Primarch, the 16th Legion's first company, and a cadre of Custodian Guard facing the overwhelming hordes of Greenskins with their ruler at their spear tip. As rampaging Orcs towered over even the Dreadnought veterans, a barrage of plasma fire weakened the Emperor's own psychic defenses. An enormous Orc seizing the Master of Mankind within its grasp, Horus Lupercal did sever the beast's arm with his power blade, saving his father before slaying the creature together. Even now, millennia removed from their former overlords of the Krorks, the Greenskins were dangerous in the extreme. The Emperor rallying his entire Great Crusade armada to confront their strongholds following the warpfold implosion of the scrap world of Goro. Enacting the Ulanor Crusade, seeking to behead the leader of the Orc Empire, Overlord Erlak Uruk. Upon their capital world, 100,000 Space Marines of the combined Lunar Wolves, Ultramarines, White Scars and Blood Angels invaded. Supported by 8 million Imperial Army forces, 100 Titans of the Legios Ignatum, Atarus, and Griphonic, and over 600 naval ships in orbit, millions of greenskins perished before Horus Lupercal hurled the lifeless body of Erlak from the walls of its fortress. Breaking the single largest contingent of orcs which had coalesced in the absence of the Eldari from the galactic stage, humanity had now established itself as the true inheritors of the stars. Yet with their own downfall, opportunities for the orcs to fester would manifest, from the War of the Beast to the devastating wars of Armageddon. The greenskins once more mobilizing for galactic domination as part of the great war of their prophet. To be an orc is to be the barest example of intelligence. Their obscene musculature, quick tempers, and bloodthirsty need for violence, evidence of their inferior design as nothing more than a tool of conquest. Incapable of creative endeavor without the need to regale tales of battle, so ingrained is their need for combat that a quirk of their physique is their ability to grow larger in stature should they succeed in surviving what they would call scraps. Capable of surviving the most grievous wounds, not by dint of genetic tailoring, alike to the Astartes, but rather stubborn defiance made manifest. Even should an orc lose crucial organs in battle, should they remain ignorant of such a fact, it is not uncommon for them to persist. Replacing hearts with close approximations of similar-looking harvests of the slain, or even surviving beheadings should a fresh body be forthcoming. Their incredible resistance to pain, disease, and other maladies beggars belief. Their regenerative abilities, allowing them to stitch body parts of other orcs to their form without worry of genetic compatibility. The only way to truly slay these fungal atrocities is with cleansing flame, lest their spores give way to new life. Typically stockier than the average human, despite their similar heights due to their hunched bearing, greenskin limbs are replete with taloned fingers, all the better to tear throats and eyes, should their pummeling strikes prove insufficient. Leathery of skin, pocked with benign parasites, and festooned with scar tissue, their bone density is extremely thick, especially for their skulls, which are replete with rows of sharp, jagged teeth. Feasting on their own subspecies for sustenance, among other forms of life, including humans, orcs never stop growing should their insatiable hunger for battle remain uncontested. Though should an orc be starved of violence, an enfeebling of their senses will ensue. Amalgamations of both terrestrial and fungal traits, allowing for their incredible adaptability. Whilst their animal cells contain information of their specific subspecies, their fungal components biosynthesize to define the orcoid type. The algae which permeates their cells, the cause of their green complexion. The high metabolism of the orcs allows their bodies to remain alive, long after incurring mortal wounds, enabling their painboy and mech specialists to repair their bodies. A single trace of orcoid spores, enough to doom an entire star system to be ravaged by their cancerous influence. The survivors of each initial tribe, culled from such domains, regroup from their defeats, reproducing and adapting to have another go. Condemned to inevitable defeat, should immense measures not be taken to root out the infestation, root and stem. Should any escape a civilization, to spread word of the scrap on the surface to neighboring systems, battle-deprived orcs shall also beset such holdouts in force. Entire swathes of the galaxy, infested with minor orcoid empires, comprising by far the largest military power across all segmentums. Though many can be combated piecemeal when assembled into a war, their devastation knows no bounds. While I will keep the uncomfortable discussion of orc reproduction to a minimum, what needs to be known is merely that they procreate asexually, their fungal spores growing within the soil of distant worlds, growing into forms alike to a womb. Such peculiar plant life, producing every known kind of orcoid species. The first to be produced are squigs, which shall provide future nourishment, followed by snotlings, who will tend to cultivating such beasts of burden. Next are Gretchins, which subsist on smaller orcoid fauna until their work to erect settlements is complete. The foundations of orc civilization when set, allowing larger orcs to reproduce, now benefiting from abundant food sources, labor, and materials. Trillions of spores carried on the wind, allowing their widespread and simultaneous infestation. Whilst orcs continually drop spores in life, with the death of each and every orc, they release millions more upon their deathbed, ensuring their legacy continues. Feral tribes, surviving within native wildlife ecosystems as they grow in number or await their kindred to descend from the skies. Many a planet has been deemed necessary of exterminatus countermeasures to ensure the destruction of such threats. The smallest of all orcoids, known as snotlings or snots by their kindred. These tiny beings are unfit for even small arms fire and are typically used as shock attack gun ammunition, serving as pets or even snacks for their merciless overlords. Sometimes carrying shards of glass or small cudgels made of scrap into battle. Strangely, such diminutive creatures lack violent tendencies and prefer to provide medicine, food, and drink to their masters. Sharing extremely close bonds with squiggly beasts which reside within orc cesspits, Though many such attendants are devoured each day, it is often a preferable risk than being in the presence of their larger kind. Organized by their merciless runt herds, which use a variety of methods to achieve the obedience of bands of snotlings and gretchens, their grot pods and squighounds instill fear in their hearts, cultivating their anxieties to serve orcoid society. The next largest subspecies, known as gretchen, also known as grots. These low-cunning vermin, thought to be mature snotlings, though more numerous in number than their orc masters, are likewise to snots, unsuited to conventional warfare. Stealing anything not nailed down, or in some instances, even the things that are nailed down, gretchens prey on the weak and injured to sate their need for violence, using their sharp teeth and middling weapons. Their anatomy benefiting from large noses, ears and eyes, allowing for great senses of smell, hearing and night vision. Most champion of all virtues is their need to survive underfoot within the thick of mayhem. Evolved to have something akin to a sixth sense for danger, their use of rude gestures in the face of authority is often coupled with fawning apologies if caught, resulting in mixed success to evade consequences. Exceptionally clever, at least when compared to other orcs. Their capacity for learning is used to their benefit, often when allying with specialists such as pain boys or mech boys to help aid in their ministrations. Flushed from their hovels when war calls to fight in vast mobs to overwhelm their enemies. Though no Gretchen is allowed to carry weapons, which may pose serious harm to an orc, in great numbers they are capable of killing larger opponents. Prolific scavengers who loot anything they can from their fallen foes. During warding actions, Gretchens wriggle through small spaces, hoping to find useful functions to sabotage, whilst their larger kin distract their enemies with weapons fire. The common parlance to which people refer to orcs being regarded by their society as boys. Each is given an attribution which illustrates their tendencies in battle, with the most numerous of such being the Slugger Boys. Carrying semi-automatic ballistic pistols, known as sluggers, into battle, serving as heavy infantry units. When in melee range, such warriors use battle axes known as choppers, and are protected by shoddy flak armor. Each Slugger Boy mob consisting of a minimum of 10 to maximum of 30 soldiers, some are led by their equivalent officer classification known as a nob, short for noble, typically armed with either a big shooter or rocket launcher. Shooter boys, attacking from range, armed with automatic rifles of questionable accuracy. Despite their lack of melee weaponry, such orcs are content to shoot wildly, reveling in the noise they make. The majority of orc society holding the belief that ranged weaponry is only as effective as how much noise its firing can produce. Mobs of 10 to 30 shooter boys make such rackets aplenty, with 1 in 10 carrying a big shooter or rocket launcher. Stick bombers, intelligent enough to understand which part of a grenade to hurl and which to keep in one's hand. These variants of Slugger Boys, though less well armed, hurl stick bombs into entrenched enemy positions, and are usually more effective at inflicting casualties. Ard Boys, acting as the heavily armoured specialists of orc battle doctrine. Their dense, heavy armour shrugs off small arms fire as they wield shooters, choppers, sluggers, and even stick bombs to fell their enemies. 1 in 10, armed with heavier weapons such as big shooters and rocket launchers. While most are not expected to live long, the most veteran of Ard Boys scavenge war zones for resources to repair or pay for a new suit of heavy armour. Spearheading every orc advance, and thus receiving the most punishment for their temerity. As a result of their dangerous lifestyle, many deem Ard Boys to be the most senior of lowlier battle lines of orc doctrine. Seen by tech-averse factions such as the Snakebites as cowardly due to their use of heavy armour, though disdaining their methods, other clans such as the Batmoons and Death Skulls favour such widespread adoptions of such boys. Deemed by their kin as walking magnets due to their proclivity to draw the most fire, their pedigree causes arrogance to spread within their ranks as they laugh at injured orcs who refuse to wear protection. Burner Boys delight in spilling gouts of flame from their weapons as consummate arsonists, targeting not only enemy combatants, but also rivals' possessions to invite a reaction. Thoroughly enjoying the Bernie dance, which their victims make upon immolation, these pyromaniacs are adept at flushing enemy positions of dug-in opposition, and often leave vast destruction when they fall, due to their volatile equipment. The following orc classifications, known by the broad term of Odd Boys. These specialized orcs benefit from the gene coding of the Brain Boys and are ostracized from most facets of culture due to their peculiar nature and perceived threat to the norm. Pain Boys, serving as the medical class of orc society, though many receive only a cursory tutoring from their predecessor during their death knell, most grow their understanding as they progress in their calling. Known by their kin as Mad Docs, or Docs for short, while much of their work is done for them by virtue of the orcoid species' incredible regenerative qualities, many a miraculous procedure has been made by such strange surgeons. using stabby bits to poke and prod at organs such as the wobbler that wobbles. When all hope is lost for a definitive recovery, Pain Boys use their living subjects as experiments to learn new tricks. Working in tandem with mechs to graft bionics to their subjects, often during concussions, it is by no means rare for docs to replace functional limbs whilst leaving injured ones untouched, often to the chagrin of their patients when awakening. The most senior of all Pain Boys, known as Pain Bosses, each is protected by cyborg bodyguards made from their surgeries, the most cruel and eccentric of such surgeons, cast out from their tribes and known henceforth as Bad Docs. Many eventually crafting insane creations regarded as cyborg Mad Boys, Bad Docs, and even Mad Docs often find employment by freebooter warbands due to their desperate need for medics within the void of space. Mech Boys, also known as Mechaniacs or Mechs for short, providing engineering solutions to the Greenskins. These bizarre technicians are employed predominantly by the Speed Freaks of clans such as the Evil Sons to maintain their vehicles. Crafting warbikes, trucks, mechanized suits, and other contraptions. The most skilled of such crafts, known as Big Mechs, carry custom combi weapons of the highest quality by Orc standards to protect their wares. Accompanied by junior Mech Boys who tend to their workshops, many are equipped with custom force fields to protect themselves from rivals and the occasional mechanical mishap. The most revered of all such artificers, known as Mech Bosses, who in turn lead their own wars. Their forces benefit from among the finest weapons and armor available, using resources pillaged from their devastation. Runt herds, also known as slavers by their kin, corralling the Gretchen and Snotlings of their respective tribe. Their use of whips force rebellious runts into submission, and convince such unruly scoundrels to fight. Riding atop squighounds, which eat fleeing grots as a means to motivate cowardly runts. Runt herds also oversee captured prisoners of other species, ranging from humans, Tyranids, and even Necrons on occasion. Earning a wealth of teeth for their services due to their indentured labor force, most Runt herds invest their spoils into reliable war gear and fight alongside Gretchen war machines to best keep an eye on their underlings. Herders, acting as the cultivators of the many squig species, which often precludes them from the front lines. These caretakers of squig food supplies, hair supplies, and other outlandish uses are less prevalent within more technologically sophisticated tribes. Most bespoke odd boys, such as some boys, used to keep track of loans of teeth and what could be considered monetary transactions. Yellers meanwhile preach the glories of Gork and Mork, whilst brew boys provide catering services to their warbands. Speed freaks, addicted to the sensations provided by their cult of speed, atop buggies, trucks, and bikes. These racers, typically of the Evil Sons clan, revel in their need to outpace everything in their path. Warbikers, riding one-man armored steeds, armed with twin-link big shooters and Dakka guns. Their Prometheum reserves billow thick fumes from their bike's exhaust as adrenaline courses through the rider's blood. Also carrying sluggers and choppers when riding as part of mobs of as few as 3 and as many as 12. Often senior knobs or even war bosses ride at the forefront of their assembled chargers to prove once again that Reddans go faster. Flyboys, driven from the ranks of the warbikers due to their irrational behavior and determination to reach new thrills. Only within the skies above is there freedom enough to sate their daredevil nature. Achieving euphoria too great to be constrained upon the soil below, Flyboys commit to suicidal aeronautic maneuvers in order to dive bomb enemy positions, with many an orc deeming them to be Mad Boys in all but name. Piloting not only Deathcopters, which hover over the battlefield, providing aerial support to ground forces. Their Dakka jets hunt enemy aircraft, leaving smoke trails in their wake, as torrents of their bullets fill the skies in hopes of snagging a target. Burner bomber pilots, sacrificing speed for destructive potential. Each clamps as many incendiary bombs and rockets as possible to their chassis, before raining them down upon their foe. Exhilarated by the sight of clusters of infantry burning up close and crispy, bomber pilots often return to their base of operations, having gore splattered upon their craft's undercarriage as a result of them trying to get a better look of the carnage. Blitzer bomber pilots, dropping their payloads at point-blank range, achieve through daring nosedive plunges. All laugh every step of the way as they wait for the last moment to release their ordnance and pull away from the fallout. Youngest of the potential Flyboys are known as Storm Boys, whose rebellious nature is best recognized by the ridiculous rocket packs strapped to their backs. Their raucous landings from above, honing their skill at flight whilst remaining stuck into the fight. Wild Boys, shorn from the remnants of failed orc invasions, rendering them into feral orcs. These bands of strange oddities yearn to seek out their parent worlds, hoping to galvanize their connection to orc culture above even their own need to fight. The disciplines of both docs and mechs combining to form a position known as a pig doc. These feral orcs tend to their tribe's warboar herds, which they ride into battle in deference to technological alternatives. Weird Boys, the equivalent of psykers within the greenskin ranks, though they do not draw directly from the power of the warp, they instead harness the Gestalt collective psychic power of their respective Wa. Their heads exploding should they drink too deep of the power of the Great Green. Many a tribe has been severely damaged by the antics of such Weird Boys, forcing them to avoid combat whenever necessary. Dragged into combat by order of their warboss to unleash green flames and bolts of lightning to even the odds of battle, many succumb to the intoxicating allure of their abilities and are henceforth known as Warpheads. The label Mad Boys, a designation for feral orcs who have fallen beyond the recognition of even their feral kin. Particularly irrational Mad Boys are known as Nutters by their kindred and are separated from their squads. Deteriorating into squabbling lunatics, arguing with their fellows over what true orkiness is. Many unintentionally rally to fight beside Weird Boys, armed with anything as normal as a chopper, or unconventional as a bucket full of terror squirrels. Each greenskin rabble consisting of as few as a dozen to hundreds. When combined in numbers, such groups comprise a tribe of as many as millions of orcs, each led by a warlord. The absolute pinnacle of wealth, power, and martial prowess, warlords are the apex of the greenskin species, and consolidate their power using force, cunning, and obscene acts of violence. The promise of fights, loot, and opportunities to rise up the hierarchy, often coalescing into an orc war. Hundreds of thousands of greenskins converge as a warlord's reputation grows, all hoping to get a scrap of the spoils to come. Dividing their tribe into divisions of around 100 to be commanded by a warboss. Every warband varies wildly in character, though typically formed around a reliable band of orc boys at its core. Every tribe ascribing their temperament to an overarching clan which epitomizes their characteristics. As the being known as Orchimedes once said,
"Thinking is for gits, but everyone's a git, so you might as well think like some other git."
While tribes constantly reform and alter their allegiances to one another, their adherence to the principles of their clan remains constant. Yet to think of orcs to be anything near uniform or following conventions is a fool's errand. Orc inclinations to their clan identity speculated to be a result of genetic factors rather than choice. While an evil son may be predisposed to adrenaline chasing, bad moons often grow teeth at an accelerated rate from their rivals. When assembling tribes into a war, infighting is always inevitable, conflicting views of rival tribes spilling into violent exchanges between one another, and even amongst their own. Loyalty to one's warboss often above that of the clan to which they ascribe. All orcs are united with the presence of a common foe, setting aside their grievances until their species is proven victorious. The meanest, strongest, and toughest orcs of the tribes rising to the position of warboss to aid their warlord's ambitions. Though such warriors earn the greatest treasures from their master's endeavors, no tribe is complete without a capable cadre of mechs, pain boys, and weird boys. The highest ranking and most war-toughened warriors of the tribe, known as meganobs, these imposing soldiers often clad themselves in mega armor to convert their form into something more akin to a bipedal tank. Exchanging bountiful quantities of teeth with mechs to purchase and maintain such equipment. Though many deride such panoplies as a source of mockery, they are nonetheless a status symbol among orc culture. The elite flash kits, often following the creed of the Batmoons, armed with among the greatest shooters teeth can buy. These ostentatious vandals offer their services as mercenaries to myriad warbands and unleash enough dakkar to make any warboss smile. Looters, on the other hand, prefer the firepower provided by rockets and energy weapons, their mobs stealing anything of value as spoils from their def guns covering fire. Nobs, the equivalent of an officer cadre of battle line orcs akin to a ruling caste. Many an example is made of smaller orcoids by such brutes in order to maintain a tenuous type of order among the rabble of greenskins. Marauding in mobs, festooning their armor with trophies from sundered foes, only the strongest are sent through the ranks to more powerful positions, and thus nobs are constantly seeking out new opportunities to test their mettle. Commandos, among the strangest of the hierarchy due to their cunning nature. Their invaluable tactics of orc maneuvers do little to impress their peers, yet such infiltrators are nonetheless a boon to any tribe who benefits from their expertise. Tankbusters, in contrast, earn great respect for felling colossal war engines using rockets and tankbuster bombs, their trophies taken from armored vehicles proudly displayed for all to see, with internal mechanisms often worn as jewelry and the flayed skin of tank crews used alike to pelt adornments. Gorkanauts, epitomizing the brutality of Gork made manifest, These hulking warsuits brimming with Daka, though not of particularly high rank in Orc society, are regardless a particularly brutal calling for the most violent of greenskins. Morkanauts, on the other hand, are a more bespoke creation, developed by mech boys to carry strange armaments, such as energy weapons. They're typically outcast pilots, sometimes known as bad mechs, often targeting their own tribe settlement to test their firepower. Death Dreads, the closest approximation to an Imperial dreadnought. These metal monstrosities wade into battle to vent their frustrations, living as they are within their uncomfortable and claustrophobic environment. Killer Khans, the grot equivalent of a Death Dread, and thus even lowlier in standing among the hierarchy, though the pilot inside would ordinarily be a nuisance of an opponent at best. Now wrapped within a chassis of steel, their capacity for violence is greatly increased. The Orc equivalent of god machines, Gargants, created by Big Mechs, as visions from Gork or Mork fill their psyches. Such constructions cause rival Big Mechs to create their own, better versions, which causes a chain reaction, often as a sign of an impending war. The smaller variants of Gargants, known as Stompers, acting as icons made in praise of the Orc gods, each can carry a mob of Orcs within its construction, as its Death Cannon and Super Gattlers pave the way for their advance. As the single most dominant species in existence to this day, one might ask what the objective is for such savage brutes, yet the simple answer is, might makes right. Orc philosophy, adapted from this single fulcrum of understanding. In the eyes of the greenskin, all weakness must be purged, so that only the strongest shall survive to one day be beaten by an even mightier foe. Barbaric in the extreme, as a result of this single tenet which all Orcs uphold as their champion virtue. No enemy is too great to face, as their own self-assuredness is nothing short of delusional. Incapable of forming stable bodies of governance, creating great works of art, or bettering the standards of their society beyond that of the individual. These beasts, were they not constantly fighting one another, would hold uncontested total dominion of the stars. Free from the neuroticism which other species suffer, seeking out purpose or value in a careless galaxy, the Orc benefits from an almost commendable ethos of never giving up and always attempting another struggle for success. Issuing doubt for ignorant certainty of their cause, so long as another being is ready for a scrap, the Orcs are in their element. Qualms such as the sanctity of life or progress of a collective species beyond their small minds. Seeking wealth only as a means to make themselves stronger as individuals. To be Orky is to be the largest, toughest, and meanest of all rivals, with most Orcs following the tenets of Gork, rather than his cunning alternative, Mork. The savagery of the greenskin, coalescing into wars which unite their people into a single purpose. Without the sustenance of battle, such vast armies cannot sustain themselves, and thus wars target the most heavily defended outposts they can. Orc populations migrating from their birth planet once critical mass has been achieved. Their ingrained need to spread like a cancer is bolstered with the collective psychic field, which all greenskins generate. Bigger is always better, and as an Orc society grows, so too does their intelligence and psychic pull to assimilate more warriors into their war. The pinnacle of their existence, achieved with such parodies of a crusade, requiring incredible might to repel. Each victory emboldened by their rampage as they seek stronger enemies to defeat. Only once no foe remains will the Orcs once more turn against themselves, bringing to ruin everything their conquests have achieved. The motive force which drives the greenskins, so potent that most of their weaponry cannot be fired by non-Orcoid hands, somewhat alike to the Omnissian Creed. The reflections in the warp of their primitive beliefs manifest in bizarre ways aplenty. Resurgence of immaterial phenomena galvanizing the gods of chaos with the birth of the Great Rift. To contest such a shift in galactic power, Gork and Mork are said to call their followers for a final war to join the eternal conflict. Their empire, spanning the length and breadth of the galaxy, as trillions upon trillions of spores infect new star systems with each passing day. The rallying cry of the prophet of Gork and Mork, promising a war to end all wars under its banner. For the greenskin tide never ends, but rather recedes, and in the era Indomitus, all can see plainly that the Orcs are mobilizing in far greater numbers than ever seen before, and with a marked escalation in aggression, even for Orc standards. The incursions of warp storms seemingly feeding their collective psychic resonance, which leads to new warbands emerging across all 5 segmentums. Weird Boy sightings have also exponentially increased. Perhaps if the Xenos races combine their efforts with the Imperium, this blight upon the stars might once and for all be purged, but such a notion is a fantasy. For the reality of the greenskins is that they shall always blight the stars, and all that can be done is excise their larger numbers. The orcs are the pinnacle of creation. For them, the great struggle is won. They have evolved a society which knows no stress or angst. Who are we to judge them? We Eldari who have failed, or the humans on the road to ruin in their turn? And why? Because we sought answers to questions that an orc wouldn't even bother to ask. We see a culture that is strong and despise it as crude. This has been a tale of the Greenskin Menace, read by the Remembrancer. To rid the orc menace from the stars is a fool's errand, an impossible task even with the technologies and resources available to the Imperium of Man. Yet to stem the Greenskin tide is not a futile endeavor, for new life shall spring from worlds spared from the Xenos' malice. In your life, many a task will seem endless, its trials compounding to create burdens which alone seem to never lighten, no matter how hard we attempt to diminish them. Do not give in to such struggles out of a sense of futility, for the heaviest of torments can still be carried, the support of those you cherish easing your burden until you have the strength to overcome them. So seek those who can aid you, knowing you can prevail, for few trials are impossible should you tackle them with stalwart allies by your side.